Okay, so we're going to redo the 2 and R from the 2016 TOC Octofinals debate between Felix, Tan, and Achel. Achel read 50 States Bad in the 1N. Felix responded to it with, what would you say, about 45 seconds of arguments in the 1AR. And so Parker's going to practice a 6-minute expansion, or maybe not 6 minutes, but 4.5-minute expansion on the 50 States debate as a way to punish super short 1AR argumentation and also see if it can make the 2AR impossible. Cool. This is obviously not a speech given in real time. Achel didn't go for 50 States Bad, but we want to work on the theory debate, so this is the drill word.
Alright. I guess I have one question I have to ask you. Do you think that overview should do literally all the weighing? Because what I'm asking about specifically is there's second order weighing that happens a little bit later. That's a little more technical on the line by line. Should I just
second order weighing should happen on the meta issue, on the issue itself. So no, the 2&R overview should not do all the weighing.
Okay.
On sub issues, you should do weighing at the sub issue itself.
All right, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
Ready?
Yep.
Overview, obviously, and then T.
Cool.
Two parts to this overview on Topicality. First part is the 1AR did zero comparison between the standards. Do not allow new 2AR comparison or weighing because the 1AR had that opportunity. You chose not to. You should not award them to stand by the argument because 8 point of the road to decrease clash and obviously not respond to argument. B point makes 2&R response impossible because you force me to be a mind reader and respond to arguments before you make them. The second part of the overview is that there are 4 standards to debate: my ground standard, my real world education standard, their Topicality standard, their actor education argument standard. There's all of the 200 gets to decide which arguments come first, and the first argument that come first is that the arguments that go link back to fairness, which is only the ground standard that the negative reads. The fairness arguments come first. 8 points against the judge. It's close to judge's obligations. The balance of the debaters now. Who's more educational means closer to judge's obligation, and fairness is a necessary side control. People who have fairness should also internally because they're not getting any sort of your education. But why actor education is good if I'm not able to engage in the one I see in the first place, which means is the ground standard is the most important. The second most important argument is the education standard, which I'll do specific weighing. My real education comes first, which you have done zero comparison again there. The third and the fourth and least important standard is the Topicality standards that you go for because those obviously have no impact. They are not written last speech. I'll answer those arguments on the line by line. Now let's go on the interpretation. It's an interpretation that the USFG, that the federal government, the United States refers to the USFG, the violation is conceded. Now, this is where you vote negative. You see the B point on the ground standard that lose my best ground on the topic because lose the politics disadvantage, which you conceded is key negative ground. Check back the episode insolvency usually goes first, which means that this is the most important impact to active fairness. Means even if fairness doesn't come first, somehow does not come first. This somehow comes first on sides of links, since it's a hugely important ground standard. Now, your only response that can read state politics, but that is not as beneficial for a few reasons. 8 points, there's a limit disadvantage to states in politics because after we got 50 disadvantages comparatively just one USFG Congress disadvantage. B point is that there's a ground skew because their impacts are so much smaller since state politics obviously only defend a single state while you essentially get a national advantage, which means your impacts are essentially times 50. Even if I can go for something like Cali disadvantage, which is relatively important in the real world, I am still pigeonholed into only a very few small amount of politics scenarios since only a small amount of states actually have a real global impact while the USFG has a huge selection. It means I still am getting screwed. C points have predictability disadvantage. Your interpretation, since your counter interpretation includes any you say you can defend the states, the federal government, or any combination of the two, which means that I still have to cut all of these disadvantages. I have to cut politics disadvantage for the states, for individual states, and I have to cut the politics disadvantage for the federal government. Even 2 would be too much because politics arguments have to be constantly updated to them literally every day to make sure that I'm to win the politics debate. Now, this also outweighs your agent counterplan avoidance, fairness claims because of those key negative ground. That is a conceded argument on that. Now let's go into the real world education standard. This is if you somehow don't follow the ground standard, the real world education argument is a very strong argument. We're talking about how your argument is utopian since you thought all 50 states doing something at once, which has never happened in 250 years in the history of the United States before, supercharged by the fact that people like Republican states would never comply with this. Now, this is a conceded argument. Now, weighs your act specificity, your actual education argument. 8 points that it checks if your actual education is applicable because if it's not applicable to the real world, then it's useless education key point is that impact turns your actor education, because we're not getting good actor education if we're getting the one that is completely made up that can't be ported. Now let's go on to the counter-interpretation. Specifically, you read your topicality arguments. I'll concede that you win topicality arguments, but there's no impact left. Read in the last feature why topicality arguments are rather why semantics are relevant to debate. Obviously, we're having a debate-specific conversation. It means we should only care about debate-related arguments, i.e. arguments that link back to fairness education. It's not even a jurisdiction voter. Read in last feature. You cannot vote for this argument at all. There's no impact in this argument. Do not allow neutral impact, because I obviously cannot respond to it. Now I say actors are a key part of education and literature, and I'll just read the agent counterplan myself, and you'll always lose source and non-unique the agent counterplan. If I can read the agent counterplan on any app, and you can still get actor education. There's no reason why this education is uniquely key here. Second, empirically deny that the counterplan is unfair, because of your arguments that empirical without empirical one, that the counterplan is unfair, because you have not argued why the U.S. said related why the state's counterplan argument was uniquely, it'd be impossible to debate. People always debate that argument and win against it. When they're kind of like a federal government like Harvard Westlake does all the time, you know you can definitely win that argument. 3 is coordination, solid your education arguments, because you can still defend the United States federal government in coordination with the state government. My interpretation allows this, which means that because it just says you have to defend the federal government, you can send the state governments on top of that, which means you still get the education about the state. Now, for the impact turn, you can go. The federal government is easier to defend, because you can go for things like soft power arguments, because it sends a message when it sends the entire USFG doing something, which is uniquely important. 5 is even if the agent counterplan is unfair, you should just read 1 AR theory against it. That's completely better than you just reading a plain text that prevents me from going for it in the 2 other they're going for in the 1 and C, because there are some circumstances where the 1 and C should be allowed to read the agent counterplan, i.e. if the app is a new app, it would be justified. That should be hashed out in the interpretation debate, but our interpretation never lets me do that. It always just unequivocally does it, which is not I have a specificity advantage to my interpretation on the ground debate. Now let's go into fiat abuse claims. All this is just defense against my real education claims. First, this is compared to the worst, since Democrats have passed gun control policies through Congress for, i.e. the Brady Act in like the 1980s. Second is that Congress can still pass things, but the United States states have never acted in unison before, which means there's still a comparative advantage. Even if the Congress would never pass gun control, the states would never pass gun control ever either, which means there's no link differential on that level, which means you have to tie break on the issue of would they ever act this way, i.e. would they ever be able to pass policies this way, and that's the definitive, this definitively goes in the answer of the negative, because the Congress has never passed, Congress passes things all the time, but the states never act in unison. That's supercharged by the fact that states like Texas would never pass gun control policies in the end of days. Now this argument, now the topicality debate is a decisively negative. Now let's go on the substantive debate, which will just make the tour a little bit harder.
How long was that?
Yeah, 5:30. So it'd be pretty hard to have a substantive out in 30 seconds, but I mean, T-debate is pretty much over.
Yeah, T-debate is pretty much over. Okay, so let's go through this systematically. When you listed out the 4 standards to the debate, you didn't do it very clearly. You A, stumbled, and B, lost a little time. It was just inefficient. So it should be organic, right? Like you should number them with your hands. You should be like, there are 4 standards that you have to resolve on the topicality debate. The first 2 standards were read in the 1 NC. They were blah, 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 blah. The second 2 standards, the first and second standard were read in the 1 NC. They were X and Z. The third and fourth standard were read in the 1 AR. They are Y and A.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's just like memory stuff.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Like, I was just going through all of this, and it's like, I was just trying to remember all the standards when I listened.
Okay, that's fine. There's no warrant for why the 2 and R gets to decide which comes first. That should probably be warranted.
My argument is just the 2 and R gets to decide, because
is that the 1 AR did 0 comparison between standards?
Yeah,
okay.
Like, 2 and R can't make 1 arguments. The 2 NR is making 1 arguments. So
cool. On prefer fairness, I think this debate should be scripted. We have a pretty good fairness education blog. Can you write on your homework list to go through it and create a 20-second version of it and to time it? So scripted fairness education short. You should be very robotic on this debate, and it should be crystal fast. Not crystal fast. It should be crystal clear and super fast.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. The constitutive argument is okay. Fairness controls the internal link is okay. None of those arguments are particularly incredible, but it gets the job done.
Incredible arguments for fairness first?
I think those are probably the 2 best arguments. I think it would be best to combine it with an education bad argument. So I guess when I say okay, I'm being a little too harsh. They're like good arguments for sure. I just think your articulation of them was not fantastic. I think it could be a little stronger. especially in terms of the persuasiveness. So then you say the second most important standard is education. You don't really have a warrant here, and then you say like the fourth and least important standards are topicality. So we somehow went from 2 to 4. Sort of forgot about 3.
It's like the numbering is correct. It's kind of the linguistics. The most important voter is fairness. The second most important voter is
Yeah, so the
education.
least
And then
important standard then is textuality.
The least important standard is the textuality standard.
Right. So you want to refer to it. Okay. So a couple of thoughts. First is the way you should do education jurisdiction weighing is you can be like, so this means the top level way you compare all of our standards is fairness versus education. If for some reason they win the education debate, then the only question that is remaining for you is how would you compare education to jurisdiction? Education definitely also outweighs jurisdiction, but it comes lexically after fairness arguments for A point is this, B point is this, or something like that.
Should I do that there? Because I mean, all my arguments in Topicality, there's like no impact. There's no warranted impact. So like, who cares?
Yeah, well, you should definitely say the 2AR could potentially go for its textuality arguments and say jurisdiction outweighs both fairness and education. But these arguments would make no sense because there was no jurisdiction voter in the 1AR. And yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah.
Cool. And you'll say semantics bad.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so on the line by line. So, the other thing is don't refer to the standard about semantics as topicality. You should for sure be trying to refer to it as textuality.
Well, he called it topicality.
Okay, but I would, for optics purposes, not go for topicality and then concede the topicality standard, right? It just doesn't look good aesthetically.
Okay, yeah, just call it textuality.
Yeah, okay. Line by line. Can't read 50 states, politics. I would have liked there to be some summary of like, compare the politics debate in the world of the interpretation versus the world of the counter-interpretation. The counter-interpretation politics debates make no sense because the NEC has no incentive to engage in them since their impacts are limited by the fact that they only can read dissats to a specific state, and they are also going to always be behind on the line by line of that debate because the world of the AF gets a national ban, which means it'll always outweigh the politics scenarios. Additionally, it probably makes research burdens way too high for the negative, which means the negative will actually never get around to these states' politics debates, amplified by the fact that most people don't even read 50 states as their AF actors, so most people are updating politics constantly at the federal level, which is the only thing that makes sense because politics has to be updated every day. So those arguments, I think, are a little bit more persuasive than the way you framed it, just because I'm using rhetoric like explicitly being like, look, like compare what politics debate looks like in
Should
the...
this be like after the line by line, after I list those 3 arguments, just like compare the 2 worlds?
Yeah.
Cool.
So like think about what these 2 worlds look like. My world has this, this, and this. His world has this, this, and this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So add that in because I'd like to hear that again. Why it outweighs the agent CP avoidance claims is not really understood to me.
Okay. I just went for this as super key ground. So it's like the size of impact.
Okay. So when you extend your ground standard, I would definitely be... We need to work on the perceptual dominance when we extend offense, right? So extend the ground standard. This is the first place you can vote negative. The argument is that I need politics ground. It's a key way to check against affirmatives that are based off gun control because most of the analytic or most of the empirics on this debate flow AF. Additionally, the politics debate is probably uniquely educational and good negative ground because it lets us test the affirmative from a different angle. You are not sufficiently responding to this. Your only argument is that I can still read politics. I just read it at the state levels, but there are multiple disadvantages to your model of the politics debate versus my model of the politics debate. A point is this, B point is this, C point is this. Does that make sense? The only difference between what I'm saying and you're saying is the framing behind it.
Yeah.
Cool? So the way you package these arguments is vital. And you're faster than me, you're more efficient than me, and so you'll get it much faster in real time.
Yeah.
Cool. I think all 3 of your arguments on AT can read state politics were good. So good job. On real world education. So you should say this is the second place you can vote negative. So number your voting issues. Okay, so on the 5 arguments about accurate education and the neg just reading an agent CP, which one were your best arguments?
I guess this is kind of confusing since this is like 2 standards melded into one.
Yeah.
Which makes it kind of confusing. I think on the fairness question, read 1AR theories. That's a better check. It's pretty good.
Good. So it's specifically way better than the number 2 argument about empirical claim without empirical warrant that CP is unfair. No reason why state CPs are bad. Harvard-Westlake can go for it. I think that on that number 2 argument, you should point out, you should have said something like you can always go for the impact turn on the state CP, or you can outweigh the federalism disside. So there's no reason that it's important, right? Like there's probably some serious size of link issues on the federalism DA. And this is empirically proven by the fact that Harvard-Westlake goes for like substantive answers to 50 states.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Go for the impact turn.
Yeah. Cool. And I think your answer on number 5 was fantastic, specifically the part where you went into how there's a specificity advantage to your interpretation on the ground debate, because there are some instances in which the state CP is a key generic against new AFs, and so 1AR theory should be the true check against the agent CP. Now, what you're missing here is some of the big picture framing. The way I always frame this, and I highly encourage you just straight up do it the same way, is there is a better solution to the problem you point out. The solution to the problem you point out should not be that the AF gets to read 50 states. The solution to the problem you point out should be that the 1AR reads theory. And we can obviously make that a little bit more concise. But using the words, there is a better solution, or you point out the wrong solution as the synonymous way of explaining it, is the exact rhetoric I want.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, I would be like something like, the 1AR isolates a problem, so the 1AR correctly isolates that the negative can read agent picks in a world of the interpretation, but it does not isolate the correct solution to the problem. The 1AR's solution to the problem is that they just get to choose the actor as 50 states. That's absolutely ridiculous. The solution to the problem should be that the 1AR gets to read theory when the negative reads 50 states counterplan in an abusive way. Additionally, there's definitely a specificity advantage to the counter solution I'm offering, because there are some instances in which the 50 states counterplan is a key generic to test against hyperspecific new AFs, and we get to actually resolve that line-by-line debate in each individual instance, as opposed to the affirmative just hijacking that debate altogether by reading the actor as 50 states. That's absurd.
Yeah.
So also adding in things like that's absurd, or the 1AR solution is like absolutely ridiculous, is going to add the perceptual dominance in terms of like rhetorically being like, that was stupid.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. On the fiat debate, what was the argument he was making?
I guess it was like defense against real world, where it was like fiat abuse is not unique because Congress would never pass gun control either.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you handled that debate fantastically then. Cool. In terms of efficiency in tech, I would say you were pretty good. On a scale of 1 to 10, you were probably right on 8, I would say. To get to a 9, you could have been a teeny bit faster. A couple places you stumbled here and there. But again, like I told you, we're not concerned about being at a 10. That's just not realistic. If you're at an 8, you're not going to lose very many debates.
Cool.
Cool.
This is what the 1AR does on T, then we'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you also should not transition to substance to say you're going to make the 2AR a little harder, because you lose perceptual like dominance on the substantive debate now, right? Like it's clear then you're time sucking them. And so the 2AR can be way quicker on substance, and then like the 2NR is just a time suck. Obviously, it's not going for this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You should just say substance, and then for 30 seconds execute it as fast as you can.
Go for like a solvency turn or something.
Yeah.
Cool.
Exactly. For 30 seconds, and maybe 20 seconds winning the solvency turn, 10 seconds winning it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool?
Yep.
So let's talk about 2NR consolidation. I want you to take prep time and then give a 3-minute version of this speech where you cut out 2 minutes worth of arguments. So you'll have to cut them out somewhere, and I'm curious to see how you consolidate. So for those of you following at home, practice this speech until you can give it the same way Parker has, and then work on this consolidation drill that we're about to do. Take prep time, and then let's listen to how Parker does it. Okay, so for those of you following along at home, Parker has taken some prep time, and he has expressed concern about sometimes being bad at consolidating arguments in the 2NR and the 2AR. So we're going to practice the 2NR consolidation drill from the same round. He's going to give the same speech 2 minutes faster, 2.5 minutes faster. Ready whenever you are.
Cool. Same order. Ready?
Yep.
Or if you're on Topicality, you can have two parts. First part is that you do not allow new 2AR comparisons since when you had the opportunity to do weighing arguments, but it just shows not to do them, which means you should whether for sandbag those arguments because the 8 point data decreases clash because I respond to arguments made the 2AR B point makes it 200 possible because it forces me to be a mind reader. Second is that there are 5 standards to debate my grand standard and my real education standard that one and goes for, and then their actor education argument, their agent counterplans bad argument, and their Topicality standard. The 2 most important ones are the ground standard that I read and their agent counterplan arguments because that links to fairness, and fairness is the most important voter fairness of fairness outweighs 8 points that fairness goes to yourself against the ballot to debate who's more educational, who's more close to the ballot, which means that it's uniquely the side constraint that's necessary to determine that the point is that controls internally to education to Topicality because I can never engage with you on a topical debate and substantive debate if your our case arguments are unfair. Now let's go on the live line. It's an interpretation you defend the entire federal government negative because these violations you see that you do not do so now. The ground standard. This is where you vote negative because it was my key ground on the topic. That is the politics ground. That is the politics ground, which is awesome on this topic because and a key negative generic because you assumption most skills that is conceded argument. Now you say your only plus that can be state politics, but there's a few disadvantages to that argument. One is that there's a limits disadvantage because I have to cut 50 states disadvantages rather than compared to just one USFG advantage, which means even if it's good ground, I cannot access that ground. One is that there's a ground disadvantage to your interpretation. I have no incentive to read the politics disadvantage because I have to read a disadvantage that's 50 times smaller than yours because you essentially get a national ban, but I essentially I can defend one state, even if there are state politics that affect the entire globe. Those are comparatively less than the USFG policies, which means I'm still pigeonholed in certain impact terms and impact cards, which are much worse. And you have better defense on my scenario. C1 is that they're predictably disadvantaged because your counter-interpretation allows both federal government and state government, which you have to defend both. I have to cut the disadvantage for both of them, which is way too much since these arguments have to be constantly updated on the link level debate and the impact debate, which is to mix it impossible for me to access this argument now. Compare the world just in general. Compare the world of me reading state politics versus the world of federal politics. I've given you 3 unique disadvantages to mine because I can access the arguments, and those arguments are uniquely better for me to have an incentive. Which in your world, I have multiple disadvantages. Now let's go on to the counter-interpretation. Let's go on to the agent counterplans arguments. First, there's better solutions. You should just read agent counterplans bad argument. There's just a better solutions. You should read 1AR theory. If I read an abuse of 50 states counterplan, there's a few that's an alternate solution, and it's uniquely better on specificity of interest. Sometimes agent counterplan arguments are justified, i.e., when you work a new app, which means and that specificity is uniquely hashed out in the interpretation counter-interpretation debate. Second, there's no warrant for why there's why agent counterplans are harder. You could just impact turn them or go for substitution arguments. So why outweighs. That's what Harvard Westlake does every time. They win almost every single round. Now, your state after education are going to put significant strength link defense on this argument, which means that you just vote in the fairness arguments. First, that it's not me because people read agent counterplans all the time, which means that we still have that education through that debate. That's also supercharged the fact we've had this education in other rounds, which means this round is not key. Second, this concordance solves back your impact because you can defend the federal government and the state government's acting in concordance like Greenhill used to read, which means that we get the education through that debate. My interpretation allows us to just have to defend the federal government. Besides the link question, it's a close here, which means you vote on fairness.
What? How long was that?
3 minutes.
It would have been cool if you could have gotten in one turn on real world. That it's not real world. That the impact turn on actor education. That we get awful actor education. It's never happened in 250 years. It's unrealistic. So this is a really great way for us to actually look at your consolidation issue. You've overinvested on the ground argument and underinvested on real world. And I think that you don't really need 3 different, like you could have cut out the one of the 3, like the limits disad, for instance. I think that's probably your weakest argument. You could have cut out the limits disad and instead shifted that argument to the impact turn on actor education.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really easy way for us to see your issue with argument consolidation. The issue is you have a not finely tuned sense of when enough is enough. And so you go for overkill sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so I think recognizing you have that tendency and then asking yourself, I'm already making 2 really good arguments here. What is the added value of the third argument is what you need to start thinking about.
Yeah.
And if you have 3 arguments, you should think about which of these 3 is the weakest. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So why do you think your limit standard is the weakest?
It's not. It's just like factually untrue. I don't think I have 50 DAs.
It's actually impact turn. You have 50 different DAs you can cut now.
Yeah.
So it actually gives you the right side on the limits, or like it's good for the it's probably good for the neg that you have 50 different ways you can cut it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should not be reading the limits argument probably ever. It's a clever manipulation of logic, and I'm cool with us doing it, but it's not very smart.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the ground disad, the predictability disad is fine. Better solution is good. So yeah, I would have really liked it if you could have gotten a third argument in on real world, which was the impact turn.
Yeah.
That would have been the best possible 2AR. Also would have been really useful had you given at least some type of lip service to the textuality stuff.
I thought I did that in the overview. I guess that was.
Well, you had like
in the sequencing question. I meant to do that.
The-
Highly likely I forgot.
it's on the B point, controls internal link to education from T, can never engage in a substantive debate if case arguments are unfair, but that's just fairness outweighs. You did forget.
There you go.
I have a pretty comprehensive flow of this, so this is the one level of debate I feel very confident in everything I write. Yeah,
I don't know if I did. I don't remember.
you totally did not give any lip service to the other 3 standards. I really liked the way you went about, like, the 2 most important standards are ground and agent CPs, because those link to fairness and fairness outweighs. I think that's the best model, and I think that model will work really well for you. But I think in that overview, then you need to be like, the other 3 standards either link to education or to jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is not impacted as a voter, so don't vote off of it. This means the textuality debate can be conceded by the 2NR, and the 2AR cannot leverage that as offense. And also the education arguments I will put a turn on, as well as I've just done weighing for you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Cool. So yeah, I like that model. Like 4 standards in the debate. The 2 most important ones are this and this. This is because they link to fairness. Fairness outweighs.
Yeah.
So instead of being like, here's how you delineate between the 4, fairness outweighs, and then education outweighs, you say the 2 most important is this one, are these because they link to fairness.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. But you've done no meta weighing then between ground and the actor specificity or the agent CP argument, which is fine because your answers on agent CP are good.
Okay, it's territory.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's one level of weighing that's missing.
Cool.
So ideally, also, you could have gone, when you got to the agent CP debate, you could have been like, the ground standard outweighs because there's recourse for agent CPs, no recourse for me losing politics.
Yeah.
So actually, on the first argument for better solution, you could have also said this uniquely justifies why the ground standard also outweighs. This is the type of like really in-depth, like nuanced analysis Jackson got really good at, and this is why he was almost impossible to beat on the theory debate. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Everything else was good. So consolidation-wise, 2 key mistakes. First is not leaving yourself offense on the education debate, and second is putting no lip service on conceded textuality.
Yeah.
So the 2AR can go for a clever, especially a 2AR that's as good as Felix is, can go for like a clever like semantics first argument.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And that like would definitely make the debate unnecessarily close.
Yeah.
Cool?
Cool.
And the other way you can answer this like textuality versus fairness debate is you can be like, look, like the topicality question is just a nib that the AF needs to answer. The fact that the AF is topical doesn't then mean that the AF is fair. There are still topical AFs that are unfair in the topic literature. Yours is one example of it.
Yeah.
So the fairness question literally supersedes the topicality question. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Cool. So can we make that homework for tomorrow?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that get perfect. Cool?
Cool.
So for those of you following along at home, we just spent 30 minutes working on one specific speech that never actually happened in real time. So this is a perfect example of how you can use the redos from rounds that you watch online, and you can get creative and you can learn a lot from them the way that we just did. Hope you found it helpful.